Welcome to the Myth and Magic Authors Podcast, folklore and fantasy topics aimed at creative storytellers. To write stories and challenge your brain with exciting ideas, delve into these presentations and reflections. See how fantasy realms are based on actual world history, legend, and lore. Study fairy tales, nature fables, and supernaturalism to engage in a jumble of concepts that will trigger your fancy and get you writing imaginatively. Now, here's your host, Neil Mack.
Hello, fantasy fiction fans and fantasy fiction creatives everywhere. My guest today on this exciting show has written over 500,000 words. Yes, 500,000, and there's no end in sight either. My author guest today is writing an organic epic. But what is an organic epic? Well, today we consider the concept. Yep, Vance Neudorf is an award-winning author and podcaster, and he's the writer of a series of young adult sci-fi fantasy audiobooks that's been released in 3 volumes and is titled the Cor Series, C-O-R, Cor Series. The Cor Series seems to have no end, and it's available as a free podcast. The Hammer is the first part of the trilogy, and it's set in the Midwest coal mining town in 1952. So this novel transports the reader back to the golden era of science fiction and fantasy. Vance has done his own voice work for these audiobooks too, so we can chat about creating fantasy, and we also chat about voicing characters. And of course we chat about the craft of authoring. I also discussed with Vance about what has driven him to create such a substantial piece of work. So without further ado, let's go over to Canada and speak to the award-winning author and podcaster, Vance Neudorf.
Good morning, Neil. How are you doing?
Very good. You? How are you doing?
Well, you're in probably about, are you guys are in Fahrenheit or Celsius?
We are Fahrenheit. We've managed to retain that.
Okay, you managed to hang on to that, did you?
Yeah.
Good for you guys. Yeah, we're Celsius, so I'm looking out the window at 30 below, and it's dark.
Oh.
But I have my cup of tea, so I'm okay. There you go.
It's sunny here. It's been raining quite a bit, but it has been just about 3 degrees above zero.
Yeah, no, that's great. My daughter just came back actually from London not that long ago. She was over visiting her cousin who lives there, so
Where does she
have
live?
a connection.
London? Do you know where in London?
You know what? Good question. Good question. I'm not that great. My daughter was there for a while. She actually did a work study there, and she worked at the Palladium for a little while. So it was kind of fun. Yeah.
That's really good. That's one of the best theatres.
Oh, yeah.
In London.
Wonderful place.
It's got a huge history, but it's the biggest, always used to be boasted, the biggest stage in the world.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, wonderful place. I've been. I'll put this to you. I'm not a huge London fan. Okay. I like going north, like I really encouraged her. I said, get up to York, get up to see the old abbeys.
Have you ever been to Durham? Oh.
Yeah. Well, see, that's my niece, where she goes visit, went to the university there.
Oh, it's one of the best universities in the world.
Oh, yeah. So my brother and I went to visit her, and we spent a while in Durham just wandering about. And
it's fantastic. Of course, that used to be a Prince Bishop's Episcopacy, so that's why it's County Durham.
We happened to be there. It was March. What was it have been? 2015, 2016, and it snowed. I couldn't believe how much snow there. We got stuck. I thought, this is a Canadian welcome. Hey, welcome. Here, we're going to throw some snow at you. Yeah, I just totally caught me off guard. I just didn't expect it, so it was kind of fun. Hadrian's Wall in the middle of a blinding snowstorm.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can see now why George R.R. Martin wanted to include that in the whole series, can't you?
Yeah, exactly.
Concept, the wall, separating the civilization from the uncivilized.
Yeah, but you can't keep the snow out.
No,
so I've been reading a little bit about you, Neil. It's kind of fascinating. I mean, you're 57. You're born in. I'm 61. Share some common kind of ground there.
Yeah.
And then I, of course, read about your relationship and your strong female characters, which this book I'm working on now, it's a tribute, a gift, I guess, in a sense, to my daughter, Alisa, who is actually home now with us because of the whole world situation.
Yeah.
But I find that kind of interesting, and I'm really wondering these days, being older guys, how do we write strong female characters? How do you do that?
For me, my world has been dominated by strong women because I was born into a household with three sisters. I'm the only boy. My father was a police officer, so he was out all the time, like non-stop. So certainly
Yep.
day and night. I mean, I might have seen him occasionally, but you wouldn't even see him at weekends. So my
Yes.
mum brought us up. And then I was in the show business. I started out as a song and dance type person.
Yeah.
Even though I was very young, I was in ballet classes and tap dances, which of course is all women. And
Yeah.
there's hardly any boys anyway, but all of the instructors are women. And then when I eventually got married and kind of settled down, I had two daughters of my own. So my
Yeah.
world is dominated by strong women. And,
Okay, so question I have for you then.
Yeah.
And this is the question. My daughter and I were playing cribbage by the fire, trying to stay warm last night. And I put the question to her, like, to you, what is that? What is the characterization when you think of being a strong woman? What does that mean to you, and how do you see that? Because obviously I could write something, that says, oh, this is my definition of a strong woman. It might not resonate with her at all. And she might go, oh, come on, Dad. That's kind of stereotypical. That's kind of off the, how do you, what do you see when you think of that word or that term? What comes to mind for you?
I like to think of a strong woman as a person who's able to understand their own sexuality and the power of it. I like a woman to be pliable and malleable, but at the same time completely confident in the decisions she makes, and she has a direction that she wants to follow, and she's willing to do what it takes to get to where she wants to be, her objective. When I think about my teachers in the ballet school, that's what they wanted to teach you all the time. If you want to be the best dancer, then you have to do the following things. If you want to get on stage at the Palladium, this is what you have to do, and you've got to keep doing it until you get it right. And when I've looked at my own daughters and seen how they progress, I've got two daughters. Both have done very, very well indeed. Both went on to do high-level degrees and have a very successful life. I'm pretty sure they were very focused on that, but they were able to take on other interests and non-academic ideas as well, and then add that to themselves. So they kind of snowballed along through life, picking stuff up, but still not deviating from the main objective.
Oh, it's interesting. It's interesting because the way this series of novels I'm working on, I had originally started them writing for my son, and then it got kind of tossed into a box, and I forgot about it. And then Alisa came to me 5 years or so later and said, hey, I found this in a box. I said, oh, yeah, that's the hammer. I started writing that for your brother. She said, will you finish it for me? And I said, you really want it? And she said, yeah, but there's no girl. And I went, well, yeah, I was writing it for your brother. And she said, well, can you make a girl? Put a girl into the story. And I said, sure. So I went back and rewrote it and gave Corvin, the boys, the protagonist, I gave him Kate.
Yeah.
And so Kate comes along, but Kate has no positive role models. Her mother is a disaster. Her father's away in jail. She's this runty little kid that just gets picked on all the time. She has no sense of who she is or how she should be. And but now she's in the core, which is the underground world I've created. And this morning, sitting in front of the fireplace, staying warm, I was just writing this mentorship scene where this older woman named Sarah comes along and says to her, you are beautiful in every way.
Yeah.
And you're learning so much, and you're coming into your own, and you're becoming a leader, because in their society, to be a Corvan is to be a leader.
Yeah.
And it's considered to be a male role. And she goes, no, you don't understand. That's a shared role that we share together. And we, as the women in our society, we share that role too. And you are one of us now. You are becoming this leader person. And it was just a really kind of a cool scene. In fact, I was almost a few minutes late for coming upstairs because I got stuck in it. You know how you go and you're just bang, 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 and you're typing away and you're going, oh yeah, I like this. But to me, that whole idea, I think some of the things you just said were kind of fascinating in the sense of the poise, the control, the confidence to say, this is me. I am making this decision and I'm owning this decision and I will go with it.
I think if you're going to become a leader, then you have to 100% be confident in yourself, don't you, first?
Yes.
Actually, leadership starts with you. It starts with self-discipline. It starts with self-awareness. And only when those things are kind of ticked off the list, you can then say, right, now I'm going to lead others.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's that self-discipline one you just talked about. That one has been a mantra, I guess, of mine. When I started writing, I kind of fished around and kind of went, oh, who are the kind of writers that of course, there's the traditional ones, but Anthony Trollope came to mind. And I did some study on him and realized here is this prolific, wonderful writer who was a postmaster and just disciplined himself to say, how do you, I'm going to write every day. And I've made that a kind of a part of my life now, where first thing I get up in the morning, I write. And some mornings it's wildly successful. Other mornings and I keep track. No, so last week I had a day with 71 words written. That a lot of the people that I kind of, mentor or talk to just don't see that. They're waiting for this flash, this brilliance that they're just going to happen. No, and it's like, interesting world for sure. And did I read that you wrote something like 4,500 or more words on Christmas Day? Is that right? Yeah, that was the strangest experience because, of course, this is the world we live in. It's pandemic time and all the rest of it. So this story started 20 years ago in a hospital after surgery. That's where the flash came for me of kind of like, oh, hey, here's a setting, here's a story. Yeah. And I never knew how it was going to end. And we're 400,000 words into this trilogy now. And we got something. We don't know what it is. We tested and it's not the big bad one, blah, blah. But it was a nasty sinus thing. So we canceled Christmas. Christmas Eve, I'm lying here in my study, head just coming unglued, and I couldn't even think. I couldn't look at the screen. But all of a sudden, this dialogue starts happening. And it's so fascinatingly strange and beautiful and wonderful because the storyline is controlled by this chamber where people go to in their sleep, the rulers of the culture, to meet each other. And it's always been males. And all of a sudden we're coming up to the end of the book and the doors are opening in the chamber and it's all women. Oh. And they start talking to each other about the issues that are facing the society and the culture and the situation. And all of a sudden this thing starts pouring out and I grab my phone and I just start recording. She's saying that, and then that's happening, and then that door's open, and blah, 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 blah. And it just starts to coalesce, and just pounded that through, stuck it, sent it to myself, and the next morning, it's Christmas Day. Nobody's up. The tree is lit. The presents are under the trees. Nobody's getting up because everybody's sick. Yeah. And I'm there alone around the Christmas tree, and I thought, okay, I emailed myself this thing. I start writing, and it just... It is that moment of that epiphany of just pouring out. And the ending of the book came together and it was gorgeous. I loved it. And it was that strong female leads again, turning society on their head by owning things, not in opposition to the rest of the connections, not in, in your face, this kind of thing, but just this beautiful symbiotic connection points. Yeah, wonderful. I loved it. Yeah, so that was Christmas Day. Merry Christmas to me.
Well, congratulations anyway. It's a good cut. Why did you, when you had this experience, I suppose almost a religious experience, when you are on the bed after surgery, why did you then want to work in fantasy? Because obviously this show is all about fantasy and myth and magic. So,
oh, sure. Yeah. See, my world has, of course, been dominated by fantasy literature. I'm a little bit of an odd duck child as far as very much alone to myself. My grandchildren, some of them have been diagnosed on the autism spectrum, and they keep saying, Grandpa, you're with us, you're one of us. Yeah. Whatever it was, as a young child, I was very much on my own. Like your father, I never saw my own. He was doing all his own thing. Yeah. And I lived in my own head in telling myself stories. And so I was my own story writer for me.
Yeah.
And then along comes this wonderful woman, teacher. It's grade 4, and she reads us The Hobbit. And my mind blew up. I had never, to have that being read to me. I could hardly wait to get to school. Normally I didn't want to go there. And all of a sudden my world is just expanding. And then everything I wanted. And now thankfully my brother was deep into science fiction, Heinlein, Dune, all of that. And as a young kid, I started borrowing his books. My sister was into Tolkien and Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. And so I started borrowing those books and this expanding. And then I started finding my own things. Just on my shelf here is, I just passed it on the way coming in, is Stranger from the Depths. Which is just an old science fiction fantasy book, which has an underground component to it. That one caught the fire. There was Andre Norton's Daybreak 2250, which was originally called The Starman's Son.
Yeah.
These kind of stories. And so then I just started, living in them, writing. I didn't know about fan fiction at the time. Who knew about that, right?
No.
We just lived in our heads, and we would write additional chapters because we thought, well, what if so-and-so did that?
Yeah.
And we would mentally write them, but we would never record them down. But that was the world, right?
Yeah.
So it's really fascinating that in that post-surgery experience, coming awake or out of the anesthetic in that dark room with the machinery breathing around me and these lights glowing. But in my mind, it was like all of these kind of through lines converged and said, what about a real time and space story? So no portals in the sense of to a different time or dimension. You are in your time. It is 1952. You are in your time. You're on the prairies near this coal mining town. But what if there is a society, living underground directly below our feet, and you're connected to it, and you got to find your way into that. And you're a reluctant hero. I mean, you've written some great stuff about, find these heroes that aren't so great, So my hero, this Corvin, he's the skinniest, runtiest. He's a liar. He can never tell the truth if his life depended on it. He's only got one friend, Kate. Now she doesn't want to hang out with him. Yeah. And, and then she gets abducted. So he's forced to action, not by choice, not by heroics. I've got to do something. So, that's how it all kind of just converged and came together with that world. And then since then, the world just keeps growing on me. Fantasy worlds are so wonderful because they have no limits. There's nothing to hold you in. So I love it. Fantastic.
That holds you in is human experience, because you still want to be able to explain to an audience, which is obviously your readership, human endeavor, human struggle, conflict, and that sort of stuff. And that's what really holds you back, if you like. And that contains a fantasy world, so it doesn't go splurge completely out of control and explode, like a huge supernova across the galaxy. Otherwise, it would end up being a bit like James Joyce's Ulysses, where it's just like madness.
Yes, yeah. And how do you connect to it? You can't connect. You have to have that, and that's, I think, like you said, that's the challenge of finding those little fantastical elements that take the reader out to a point, but yet it's still tied back there to their real experience. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So Kate and Sarah spend a lot of time in the garden. Well, the garden has all kinds of plants that we don't recognize, strange, fantastical plants, but yet they do connect. So when she gets a plant, and this plant actually produces a frozen fruit, and she peels it like a banana, but yet it's dripping and it's frozen, and she's eating it like a popsicle. Right. Yeah. So all of those connection points are there, although it's a fruit and it just got picked off a tree. Right. So I love that side of things. Like you just said, fantastical, but connected.
I was reading that you have probably planted about 500,000 trees in your life. So I wonder if you got back two of those two things which are consequential from that. One is obviously, I take it you're not a fan of the paper physical books. But secondly, do you think there's a connection whether it's real or whether it's imagined, between planting trees and planting words.
Oh, very much so. Tree planting, I'd say, tell people it actually ruined my life,
Right.
but in kind of a positive way. Tree planting is a very unique, strange experience. It's like going to war. It's really tough. And you learn a lot of things. And I was just a young guy. I mean, I wasn't even 20 at the time, I don't think, when I started. I did 8 seasons. And I cried. There was times that I was in total despair doing this job. But the thing about tree planting is that you are constantly, you work 12 hours a day, at least 7 days a week, at least in the old school days.
Yeah.
But every single tree that you're planting, while you're planting one and going through the motions, your mind has to calculate 4.5 meters or 2.5 meters to the next one, find the spot, plan it, doing your next move, so that it's a constant, and you get your brain into such a state that you are always planning, thinking, moving, making the next step. So my best day was probably 2,700 in a day. Well, you're moving. And to this day, after that 8 years of doing that, my mind is so restless that in any point in time, I'm always next step
of the next
step.
Yeah. So you want to keep planting this forest. This forest is going to grow. And of course, with a forest, once you have finished planting and you walk away or whatever you do, it will continue forever more after you, won't it?
Yeah, that's kind of the theory that brought me to this really strange place of podcasting my books for free.
Right.
Because I kind of came and I last year I turned 60. So, I turned 60, had my birthday, and kind of looked around at my life and what I'd been doing. And here we are in the midst of this strange time in the history of the world. And I kind of went, what do I want to do here? And I was still working on The Scepter, which is book 3, and kind of noodling around with that a little bit. And all of a sudden I said, why don't I just go back to the oral traditions of storytelling?
Yeah.
Why don't you take this thing, put it out there, whoever wants it can have it and listen to it. And not only that, invite them to, it's like we're sitting around the campfire and it's a couple thousand years ago and I'm the storyteller and I tell the story. And then afterwards someone says, well, I didn't quite get that part. And you go, oh yeah, that's right. I could make that better. So you, in your mind, you redo the story a little bit. And then the next campfire, it grows a little bit and it changes. Yeah. And I thought, isn't this fun? And I've had just a real riot with that. I've taken the print book of The Hammer, which of course, there's some left in a box, but they're not out there anywhere. And it's actually morphed a bit. Medallion went through significant morphs and changes, and Scepter is going to be doing a little bit of the same as people, work with me and connect with me. And I think it's fantastic. So your idea of leaving something behind, I'm kind of going, we're all moving on to the great beyond, whatever that is. Yeah. And when I leave behind, I'd love to leave behind a story. I don't, do I need, I had one lady that I talked to about this concept. She just got furious. She actually hung up the phone on me because she said I was dumb. I was giving something away that could make money. I'm missing the potential for investing in myself, all this stuff. And she just finally said, I can't help you, click, hung up. And I kind of went, whoa, this is a story. This is something that I'm creating that I want to give to people and share. Why does it have to be economically feasible to be valuable?
This is the oldest craft.
Yeah, I'm thinking this is just so much fun. I mean, some of this stems from, sort of my own personal philosophies of life and significance, meaning, whatever you want to call it. I'm a little bit of, because of that restless mind of mine, I found about a 3,000-year-old book of wisdom some years ago, and I started to kind of noodle around with it and play with it, learning a little bit of the background and working with it. Finally, I embarked on a translation of it. So I translated it, and it's ended up being about 5,000 words long. By the time I was finished, I had it memorized. So I talked to some of my drama geek friends, and we made it into a show where I cooked a meal over an open fire brazier while reciting all 5,000 words in costume. And it was so much fun. But it was this idea of taking this narrative and being able to just put it out there, and let people listen, engage, ask questions, stay in the character and answer those questions as if I was that guy that lived 4,000 years ago. fascinating project. So some of those things just, yeah, they energize you because, yeah, okay, you can put some money in a bank account. That's great. But when someone says to you, boy, that was meaningful. I thought through things. Boy, I love that character. Oh, that scene just caught me. And I had tears in my eyes. It was so good and gripping. So, and like you, I'm no stranger to the stage. I love to act. I've been Bumble in Oliver, and I've been Daddy Warbucks, and I do that with my kids. I'm not a professional. I just do it for the fun of it at the local little theater. But there's nothing more rewarding than throwing your heart and soul into a scene and having a strong reaction come back, where people, whether it's just, even if it's just silence, that you've performed so well that they're just quiet.
Yeah, there's lots of interesting stuff that you've just been speaking about there. The Bumble thing, you're talking about Mr. Bumble from Dickens.
Yes.
Because Dickens went around, quickly say that he went around reading his book. He actually went to America. I think he went to America at least twice. It might have been 3 times, but going out to read his book. I guess he must have changed his stories. So we know that story because it was written into the newspaper. They serialized it, newspaper. So we kind of know that he was doing that. But I wondered when he went out to narrate it, he asked for questions at the end.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering whether or not he changed his stories a bit. He was.
Oh, I would imagine.
He obviously went from being what you would consider to be a proper Victorian, old-fashioned, sit-down and write author to what we're talking about now, which is a more organic, biological author who was changing his story as he went along. Yeah,
and well, like we all say, a story is never finished; it's just abandoned.
Yeah,
you're always thinking, if until you finally say, okay, I got to let that thing go. There's new little bits that pop in, and you go, ooh, yeah. Oh, I got to get that in there somewhere. That's beautiful. That's wonderful. Or it's just so surprising. And you think, that's a cool piece. I got to get that in there. So I know, at some point in time, I've got to leave this thing behind. But for now, I've finished 2021 with about 110,000 words into the Scepter. I know it's got a little ways to go yet to wrap everybody up. Now that I have the ending, at least I'm a little bit better off. But I really, actually, one of my favorite productions was a BBC radio production of The Hobbit.
Yeah.
Michael Kilgariff, I think, was the guy that put it together. I have it on a cassette tape somewhere. What a beautiful thing, right? Yeah. And I actually wrote him at one point in time and said, hey, can I take your piece and transcribe it and use it in a local high school with the kids here, and put this on the stage? No charge, no nothing. And he said, sure, go for it. Do that. So with my daughter's class, we actually put on the BBC radio production of The Hobbit in my hometown, which is Three Hills. And that's exactly because there is Three Hills, Alberta, Canada. So the whole way, that these stories can then just turn about, and then all of a sudden these kids in high school are putting on a BBC production from, I forget what year it was. You probably can't even find it anymore. Fantastic piece. But I would like to take that sort of concept of doing, when I'm done with this story, get a group together of my drama people and make this a full functioning radio type show with Foley and all the rest of it. Yeah. And tell the story that way, really bring it to life.
When you're doing your audio pieces, unfortunately, I haven't had a chance to listen to any yet, but do you try to take on a different voice? Do you give the different characters different voices? So, what's the ups and downs of that?
Oh, okay. So I started. My kids convinced me. So when I said, it was my son and my daughter that said, I'm kind of, it's, there's more time in the day because work is doing, theater work was kind of shut down. So they said, Dad, why don't you record your book? And I said, I'm not going to record. I'm not a voice actor. No. We want it in your voice so that when you're dead, thanks kids, we can listen and the grandkids can listen. And I said, okay, I'll give it a whirl. So I recorded some, gave it to my son who's into sound engineering. And he said, oh, I like it. It's just your natural voice. And I said, well, I'm not doing voices because that's too hard. Okay, what do you do in your story when you've written and he spoke in this high grating voice? Well, then you're kind of trapped, because if you just use your normal voice, it's going to sound silly. So then I started and trying. it got so convoluted because now I have an audio file where I get to somebody and I go, what are they supposed to sound like again? And then there's times I've messed it up where, you know, the voice sounds very, and I have to go back and re-record it and go, okay, well, I got that one wrong. But there's one guy, and it's on my Facebook page, and you'll see me making this hideous face. It looks like this because the only way I can make this guy's voice is like this because he has no teeth. He's really old, but he's really angry and bitter, and he just talks like this all the time. So when I make that voice, I have to make the face to try to make him sound like what I think he looks like. Yeah. So I'm trying, but that's why I think I need some pros eventually to pull this thing off.
So you've got about 30, is that right? 30 episodes?
No, on New Year's Day, on January 1st, I put out the 100th episode. Yeah, 30 is how many Backspace podcasts there are, because Backspace are little, I restrict myself to one sheet of paper. It's about 4-minute read. And I give little background tidbits on how did the story get to there. Right. So there's 30 of those so far that say, one of the latest ones is the pellet gun experience and some of this kind of stuff when I was a kid. From the Christmas Story with Ralphie, you'll shoot your eye out, kid. So I recorded those little ones, but then beyond that, there's, I think 70 some chapters up now of The Hammer, and we're halfway through The Medallion.
You weren't around in 1952 though, were you? So this is something which is not actually in your memory.
No, not in my living memory. What it takes place from is a little town where I spent the first 5 years of my life, which is Fenwood, Saskatchewan, right, in Canada. And in Fenwood, we had, the setting of Fenwood is where this comes from. So that would have been the start of the 60s. I was born in 61. But yet when I looked at the time period and the things that I was looking at and the things I wanted to pay homage to, it was 52 just seemed like a really good year. Yeah. Because of the coal mining, very fascinating history. I work in a little town called Drumheller. It's the dinosaur capital of the world. Wow. And very strong connection to Britain because it's a coal mining town and a lot of folks came over in that era. Right. So I'm kind of writing back to that era. There's an existing historical coal mine from that era that still exists down the road from me. So then I go to visit that. And that's kind of where I'm pulling this in because it's the mining and the underground and all of that.
Yeah. And without being too disrespectful, I guess a town in Saskatchewan is going to be slightly behind. I don't mean that in a bad way, but it's not really. It's not Singapore, is it? Or no, Dubai.
Yeah. It's definitely a time warp. Yeah. It's definitely a time warp. Some of these places, I mean, even the latest Ghostbusters movie is shot and filmed in Drumheller where I work right. Because it has that throwback. You can make it look like, that's the time frame. So, yeah. And it's strange because I'm actually writing things into the book that get twigged now. So there is a chocolate bar inspired by World War II rations. It's called the Cuban Lunch. Wow. It's a uniquely chocolate and it's uses Spanish peanuts because it actually came first of all out of the Spanish War. And it was made in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and Canadian. And all of a sudden it showed back up on the shelves all these years later. And I went, whoa, where did this come from? So I checked it out and somebody had a nostalgic mindset and said, I'm going to bring this back to the market. And they did. So I wrote it into the book because I just thought it was so cool because it's from the time frame. And here it is, it popped back up. And so there's that connection both to the past and now to the present. And I put it back into the book. And I thought, I'm going to put one of these into his pack just because it was there and it was fun. So, yeah. And then great connections, of course, to London because I did a piece on Winnie the Pooh and that coming out of Winnipeg. And then, of course, going to the London Zoo and the bear and how the connection between Canada and the troops and the rest of it. A bear of very little brains. I sometimes relate.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
So, who are you writing for then? Have you got an audience in mind as you're doing this?
I am. It's been an interesting change because, like unto The Hobbit, which was kind of a simpler childlike book. And then you move over into The Lord of the Rings and it suddenly gets a whole lot more intense. And so when I started, my kids were quite young. The first book was written. In fact, I had a conversation with a story developer who said, yeah, there's a disconnect here because your first book seems like, middle grade book, but yet you're trying almost now to go young adult in books too. And I said, yeah, it just happened because the kids grew up and I started writing for them more. So I'm a bit of in an interesting place because book 2, The Medallion, it's adult themes. In fact, I write the Medallion from an experience and experiences working in the culture of drugs and addiction. Yeah. And having lost some very young friends, actor friends, to that whole sad, sordid tale, that in book 2, my protagonist gets addicted into something that he's not supposed to be using down in this society. Their society is the underground society. There's a lot of ecology in the books. So the Lumians create the light for the community. But the seeds are sacred in the sense that each Lumian produces one seed and it will produce more light if you take the seed and reattach it to the rock. However, because they are so powerful, you can eat them. But if you eat them, you consume the community's light, but you give yourself this incredibly strong, powerful high with a lot of ability to see things, makes you feel really positive, but it starts tearing your body to shreds. And he gets into this out of an act of desperation. And so I'm writing kind of to that young adult group that is going through a lot of these things. I don't know what's like over there, but opiate crisis and all the rest of that stuff that's going on here, especially in the rural towns, it's something else. So I'm writing to that. It's funny because I have a friend who's got, I think, a 12-year-old son who started reading the Hammer. And I was recording the chapters of the Medallion, and I got to chapter, I forget what it was, about 28 or so. And all of a sudden, Corvin has this very nasty experience where he's got to come to grips with himself or he's going to die. And it's quite, an intense scene. And I quickly hammered off an email to my friend. I said, I said, you might want to listen to this next chapter with your son. I said, it gets a bit intense and he's only 12. And I said, it's kind of like, this is where the books are going. And she wrote back and said, yeah, we listened to it and it was good. It was a good discussion point for us, even at his age, with where this kind of a lifestyle can lead and take you. Right. So, yeah, I guess, definitely now I'm more in that young adult and adult place, which is kind of interesting because I think there's people that start picking up the Hammer, which is the first book, and put it down right away because they go, oh, it's kind of young. Yeah. And they don't realize that this thing is going to get very complex quite quickly and really morph and change. But I can't convince them of that. So I just take what I can get. When I look at, like the Harry Potter books and, there is some, dark kind of things happening in a quite a magical setting. And I kind of, I wondered in a sense of, when you're dealing with a theme or an issue like addiction and drugs, which is very personal and at home, but yet you're doing it in a fantasy book. See, the Harry Potter, you could deal with those things in a very fantastical way and in the magical way. When I'm dealing with this in a fantasy book, I've kind of had sometimes a little bit of self-doubt on, is that really the right spot for it? And I don't know yet.
I don't think you should doubt yourself because of the experience in The Hobbit, because the ring has possession over Frodo and Bilbo Baggins, and they are constantly trying to maintain control over themselves because the ring otherwise will take control over them. So all of those books are actually, if you look at it, essentially they're a discourse about controlling a narcotic thing. Thing doesn't have to necessarily be an artifact like a ring. It could be a fancy woman or a beautiful male, or it could be money, possessions, a beautiful car.
Exactly.
But these things are there, and if you're not careful, if you don't control yourself, then they will take over your life. So narcotics has been studied. It may not be so overt, but I'm definitely aware of Tolkien was certainly trying to suggest that the power of the ring
very fascinating.
Was a narcotic power. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. No, that's the first that I have heard that. And yeah, I'm gonna have to think about that one. That is quite a fascinating way of looking at it. But yeah, same kind of thing. Corvin feels a need to have these Lumion seeds and the power they give, because he's up against a very, difficult issue, and he thinks the strength is going to help him. But yet every time it just keeps tearing him down and tearing him down, and coming to grips with, how can I make it forward without this propping me up, but yet I know that the propping me up is tearing me down. Exactly. Yeah. So it's an interesting struggle to work through on a book level like that.
Yeah. And the same with Dune, which is about spice, and the same with Star Wars, which the struggle for them is the Force, and the Force can be evil, or it can be good, and you have to be able to control that. So I think that you're on the right track there, and I think you've got to explore all of human experiences and emotions in a fantasy book, and I think it's the way to do it, actually, because you don't have to therefore you're not thumping a Bible, you're not telling people don't do this, don't do that. You're just saying, well, this could happen, and it's not related to anything that you know anything about, but let them make the connection.
Exactly. Yeah. No, and it's been a very interesting journey for me. I had a draft reader read the medallion some time ago, and he met for supper afterwards, and he said, okay, this may be an inappropriate question, or maybe I'm pushing too hard. He said he's got children that have been through this, down this road. And he said, what is your personal story of addiction? Because you've written it so vividly. He said, did you get into drugs? And I said, actually, no. I said, I've never tried anything. I drink my tea. That's about as strong as I get. I don't have a background, but I have an imagination, and I've worked very closely with guys from the prison system, guys that have been deeply into addiction, with me right there, trying to walk with them down to try to help them back to some sense of wholeness. And when you're in that world, you get to see it very up close and personal, and that's enough for me.
So do you do this now full time?
No, I actually I run Canada's largest outdoor theater. Wow. It's called the Badlands Amphitheater. Wow. It's in Drumheller. It's a 2,500 seat outdoor amphitheater with a permanent set on it. It's one of the flagship programs is a passion play, which you folks in Europe would relate to much more than Canadian, Oberammergau and all those sorts of things. Yeah. Ours has been going about 30 years. It's a cast up to 200 people. So I run that. And then, of course, we do concerts and fireworks and light shows and laser shows and all kinds of other fun stuff. And we've done Shakespeare nights, and we've got a new little theater going that we're just building right now. Big into culinary arts. I see you like cooking as well. So, that sort of thing. So that's my job, which is in this particular time frame of the world is very fascinating, because we haven't sold a ticket in 2 years. Oh. How we're alive, I don't know. We're just making it through day by day on government help and funding, right? Yeah. So that's my day job. We've just written a new script for us. We have a script writer that creates our scripts for us, and we're working on a new one. So we started that just before the pandemic. Yeah. 2019, we actually did a full-on musical version with live orchestra. We had a 15-piece orchestra, and we did a live musical version where most of the lines were sung.
Who wrote the music for it?
His name is Luke Ertman. He's an Alberta composer. Nice. Beautiful, beautiful pieces. This thing was stunning. But then, of course, when things went haywire, we had to pull the plug on that one because it was too expensive and rewrite a new script. So we are slated to begin rehearsals here in May, but we'll see what happens. Right. Yeah.
So the fantasy books, going back to the trilogy then, that's the Cor series. That's COR. And we've talked about the hammer, which is the beginning of that. And is a medallion the end of it then?
No, medallion is the middle. Right. Okay. And it's interesting. Here's a London connection for you. Okay. A jewelry company in London just sent me, because I designed the medallion. It's actually a physical piece of jewelry. Yeah. And then I had it 3D printed in London, and it arrived 2 days ago. It's beautiful. I really think they did a lovely job of it. But I just thought, I want to see what this thing. I'm a very tactile writer.
Yeah.
So when it came time for the hammer, I actually created a hammer. It's here around here somewhere in a box.
Yeah.
It's got 20 coats of black lacquer on it. It looks like a stone black hammer, and I can hold it
Yeah.
in my hand and walk about and think about what it would feel like to wield
Yeah.
this hammer.
That's very good.
So, it's the whole, as actors, we like props.
Exactly.
I got to have my props.
Exactly.
I have foils, mask, gloves. I have the whole kit.
Yeah.
And I also have a glove with a nice slash across it where my hand got. And so when you have that experience and you can describe what it felt like, it's so much different to experience. I mean, there's things you're not supposed to maybe experiment with, but in the book, The Hammer, he actually uses a Roman candle and he shoots the balls out the end. Well, I had to know if that would work.
Yeah.
So I went out in the backyard, got a Roman candle and pointed it down the yard. I started one of our trees on fire.
Wow.
So yeah, experimental writing. Yeah, no, it's I love the process. I think, and that's where the joy really is. I mean, I look at it and I go, I don't have a lot of listeners right now on the Cor series. The ones that I do have are quite encouraging, and they'll tell me what they like and they don't like. Do I need, a massive amount? No, as an author, I don't need. It would be nice, if more people would listen and they would enjoy it. I want my work to resonate and to be appreciated. But just to hear back from those few folks, I stopped in at a car repair place yesterday, and lo and behold, the guy behind the desk said, "Hey, I've been listening to that Cor series of yours. Boy, I'm loving that. I'm really having." And man, you almost float out of the shop because you go, I created,
You do, yeah.
someone engaged, and they loved it. How much better can it get?
Do you want people to start at the beginning, or is there a place where you prefer, or that you suggest they might launch into your series?
I mean, you could pick it up anywhere, but you're not, until you kind of get the background of who's who in the zoo, quite literally, because there are animal characters in there.
All right.
You would miss a lot. Hammer is, what is it, 113,000 words? It's not a super long book. It's not a long read. It's not a difficult read, but it certainly sets the scene.
Right.
So that when book 2 starts, and quite frankly, I mean, it's like Lord of the Rings. They're not really 3 separate books. There is no time break between them.
No.
1 flows directly into 2, 2 flows directly into 3. It's one story.
So where would you like people to go then? So the next step is, where do you want them to go to consume this?
Well, I mean, it's out on every podcast channel out there. It's like you said, it's Cor Series, no E on Cor, just CORSERIES. And it's out on Spotify and all the channels. You can find it anywhere. Or you can just simply go directly to that URL and that's the Buzzsprout feed, and you can pick it up there. So it's out there. I would just say, give it a whirl. It might be up your alley. It might not be. That's okay. I think, yes, Audible did pick it up because I saw it show up there the other day, which kind of surprised me because I think Audible is kind of a paid subscription and this thing's free. So, okay.
They picked it up and put it on, yeah.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, see, I'm a little bit, I'm so busy creating that sometimes I'm a little bit lax on how do you promote something, right? How do you get it out there to the audience that may enjoy it? So we'll see. Might get there eventually.
What about if somebody wanted to follow you personally and see what you're doing from day to day? Where should you go for that? Where would you direct them?
Yeah, see, I don't have the web page per se. The URL is just for the Cor series. So then again, my ability or lack thereof, I just went to Facebook and created a Cor series page. And then every once in a while, if something interesting is happening, like, I'm creating something and something goes kind of wonky, I'll put it on there and I'll throw a picture up and say, oh, this is kind of fun. This just happened. So that's about the only place, really. Everything I just made Cor series and said, take a look, enjoy, follow. If you like it. I think the most wonderful thing that it hit me the other day on going the route I have of just, here's my book, go ahead, have it, is that if there are critics, I don't have to care because you didn't have to pay. You didn't have to pay for it. So you don't have to do anything. So if you don't like it, don't listen.
well, congratulations on everything you've done so far. So when do you expect it might finish? Is there a possibility it'll ever finish?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm committed, and right now I'm getting a chapter out a week on the audio side of things.
Wow.
So that'll take Medallion into early spring, and then theoretically, if I've got the Scepter in good enough shape, which I think it's really coming along nicely. It's actually doing quite well. That I should be able to just roll right on into that, and then eventually the thing will be what it'll be, about 200 episodes long. I think right now there's 22 hours of listening out there.
Wow.
So if people want to binge, go for it. You got 22 hours at your disposal. I don't, but if you do, have fun. All right. Thanks a lot. Take care.
Happy New Year.
Yeah,
Bye.
you too. Bye-bye.